This morning, I would like to share a poem with you all. It was written by that great prophet, Shel Silverstein. It is entitled, Forgotten Language. Once, I spoke the language of the flowers. Once, I understood each word the caterpillar said. Once, I smiled in secret at the gossip of the starlings and shared a conversation with the housefly in my bed. Once, I heard and answered all the questions of the crickets and joined the crying of each falling, dying flake of snow. Once, I spoke the language of the flowers. How did it go? How did it go? Some seated in this room today may hold a literal belief in the concept of reincarnation, the idea that we each lived one or a series of earlier past lives. Some may hold this belief, some surely do not. I'll tell you for myself that I am a firm believer that each one of us has been blessed to live at least one past life, a life in a universe full of magic and whimsy, where anything is possible, a universe where the veil that separates reality from imagination is paper thin, a universe populated by kindly giants who, if we were lucky, taught us how best to live, how to tell the difference between right and wrong, and what it means to love and be loved. This past life, this former universe we once inhabited, it's not Narnia, it's not Middle Earth, it is, of course, childhood. It's a place that every single one of us gathered here today has either passed through or is currently navigating. Though some of us certainly are further removed from this magical world than others. But don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about those advanced in years. You see, your physical age does not determine your proximity to this magic of childhood. Childhood is a mindset. It is an attitude. It's a perspective. And although each of us may have lost a measure of our innocence by growing up, thus finding ourselves blocked by a flaming sword from a complete return to our childhood, each of us can still remember. Each of us can still reconnect to that time and place of wonder and whimsy. And for those of us who have forgotten that place or lack the imagination to revisit it, we are blessed to be surrounded by the little denizens of that world who are always happy to act as very capable guides and escorts. I will be the first to admit that as a busy father, like so many fathers and mothers are these days, as a busy father, I often fail to appreciate on a daily basis the childhood in my children. I don't take enough opportunities to share in their childhood. Now, if I think about that fact too long, it'll make me cry, so I'm going to move on quickly. You know, one of the wonderful things about being a tightly knit spiritual community is that we all get to share, in some small way at least, in the joy and responsibility of caring for each other's children. I grew up in the Christian church, and to this day, I can still remember the adults who showed me kindness as a child on Sunday. I remember their smiles. I remember the pats on the back. I remember the handshakes and the hugs. I remember the kind advice. Some of it made no sense to me at the time. Frankly, even today, some of it doesn't make any sense to me. But I remember that these giant adults took the time to give it to me, and it made me feel special. It made me feel important. I felt connected to them. I knew their names. They knew mine. We looked out for each other. And as a parent now myself, I know that I want my daughters to have a similar experience at this church. I want them to know you all. I want them to develop relationships with you. My wife and I, we strive to provide a safe harbor for our daughters in our home, but I know that Sage and Adia need more than just what Sunny and I can provide them. It takes a village to raise a child. These words have become axiomatic for us, but the ironic thing is, here in America, I'm not sure that villages really exist anymore. The closest thing to a village that we have, I think, is the church. My children need your wisdom. My children need your love. My children need to see your faith in action. As a spiritual village, we get to share our faith and spiritual growth with our children. Parents bear the primary responsibility for this, of course, but we all have our part to play. So I encourage you, and especially parents, whatever spiritual practice you engage in, do it in front of your kids. And when they're mature enough, do it with them. Make them a part of your spiritual formation and growth. They need to know that adults care about growing their spirits, and they need to know how it can be done. If you pray, pray in front of your children. If you meditate, meditate in front of your children. If going on an outing into nature fills your soul, then take your children with you. Let them share that experience. If singing or playing a musical instrument connects your soul to the divine, do it in front of and with your children. If studying is your spiritual practice, let your children see what you're reading. Let them see the titles of the books. If helping to establish justice on earth is your practice, bring your children to the rallies. I know that some UU parents worry about forcing any kind of religion down their children's throats. And so they will inadvertently leave a spiritual vacuum in their children to be filled presumably by the children themselves, perhaps when they are older. And I understand this concern, I really do. Many, if not most of us UUs, are the products of homes, schools, and churches where a particular religion with particular beliefs and practices were forced upon us without our consent. So we have this fear of hypocrisy. We don't want to do the same thing to our own children. So some of us then choose not to explicitly explore our spirituality and religion with our children, and we say, well, let them figure it out on their own. But when you don't teach your child something, you are teaching your child something. Silence is a statement. And if you create a spiritual vacuum in your children, something eventually will fill it. Example, if you choose not to teach your children about the facts of life, do you really think they'll simply figure it out on their own in a responsible and safe way? They will find teachers to teach them. Those teachers will be peers, television, magazines, the internet, who knows? If you create a vacuum in your children, someone or something will fill that vacuum. Your kids will find a classroom, they will find teachers, and you will have no input in the curriculum. So when it comes to living your faith, I say don't be afraid to show them a way. Not necessarily the way. As UUs, we don't necessarily believe in a single path, but certainly you can show them one path, your path. And who knows, it might eventually become a part of their spiritual formation. It might not, but at the very least, you'll have shown them that growing their spirit is an important part of life. Across the country, churches are dying. Children and young people raised in church are leaving. Some return to church when they themselves have their own children, but many others leave and do so for good. This trend is true for nearly every religion and denomination in America. And researchers far smarter than me have given reasons why young people drop out of church. I, as always, have my own theory on this. I will share it with you this morning. Feel free to agree or disagree as you are so led. Children and youth ministry in most churches, including UU churches, is often nothing more than a glorified babysitting service or a series of no-pressure social gatherings where spiritual matters and the hard questions asked by religion are never addressed. Children and youth ministry nowadays isn't really church. So what happens after we segregate our children from church entirely, give them not church for 18 years, what happens when they finally become an adult and step into a real adult church service? They will recognize nothing. They will have no taste for church because they have not cultivated a taste for it. If you feed a child nothing but Cheetos for 18 years, you can't be surprised when he later recoils from an Asiago and black truffle pate. If you want to increase the church's retention rate among young people, then you can't keep giving children and teenagers a low-nutrient, high-sugar church substitute. You have to give them a genuine taste of church. Our children need to be active participants in the life of our church, in our collective struggle to find our identity, our humanity, our purpose, and our meaning. That's religion. That's church. And if we do that, I believe we will discover that we adults will be as blessed by our children as they will be by us. You know, a pretty smart guy a long time ago kind of suggested this. His name was Jesus. You may have heard of him. I'd like to read this passage from the Gospel of Mark. I will be using the authorized King James Version of the Bible this morning because I just think it sounds cool. And they brought young children to him, that he should teach them. And his disciples rebuked those that brought them. But when Jesus saw it, he was much displeased and said unto them, Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not. For of such is the kingdom of God. Verily, I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, he shall not enter therein. And he took them up in his arms, put his hands upon them, and blessed them. I promise you, if we take the time to bless our children, they will be a blessing unto us. They will lead us to the kingdom of God. Our community simply is not complete without our children. They are not our future. Get that out of your head. Our children are not our future. They are a part of our present. And our children need church today now more than ever. 2014 is a dark and confusing place sometimes. Perhaps you've noticed. The evening news is a daily reminder of this. Every day we are bombarded by frightening details of natural disasters, wars, potential wars, acts of senseless cruelty and stupidity that hurt so many innocent people. Remember, our children and youth today, they are the 9/11 generation. They are growing up in a world where tragedies like terrorist acts and school shootings are tragically becoming normal. In a time like this, when chaos and darkness are seemingly ever at the doorstep, children need church more than ever. Well, what am I saying? We all need church now more than ever. We need each other. You know, for those of us who love this church, the past couple of weeks have been discouraging, to say the least. We didn't suffer a terrorist attack or anything quite that bad, but as many of you know, we did suffer our third break-in and burglary of the past 2 years. It happened in broad daylight with cars in the parking lot on a Wednesday afternoon. For many of us who spend a lot of time around here, this elicited a lot of emotions. People were sad, angry, afraid. Everything you expect when your sense of justice in the world and your feelings of security have been stripped from you. And if I can be honest and candid for just a moment, it was really tough for me personally. It was really tough. Part of the reason I'm a UU is because I have an abiding faith in the inherent goodness of humanity and a hope that we can continue to get better. So constant attacks on our church, or any church for that matter, by another human being, it challenges that faith, it challenges that hope, and I really found myself weary and discouraged after this last setback. The past couple of weeks, I found myself casting a suspicious eye on every person I encountered in Arlington. I found myself second-guessing the motives of just about every person I ran into. I had allowed this incident to steal my peace, to steal my hope, to steal my faith in others. So I went looking for some words to help heal and restore me. Words are a great source of healing. And I came upon this. These words I'm about to read to you come from Patton Oswalt. He's a comedian. Among our children, he's probably best known as the voice of Remy the Rat in Pixar's Ratatouille. Oswalt penned these words immediately following last year's Boston Marathon bombing. Now, of course, the burglaries and break-ins we're talking about, they're nothing compared to the loss of life and the loss of limb encountered in a tragedy like that, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I just want to point out that I think that Oswalt's words were pretty applicable to just about any situation where any one of us may be tempted to lose a part of our faith and our hope. Oswalt writes, Boston, horrible. I remember when 9/11 went down, my reaction was, well, I've had it with humanity. But I was wrong. I don't know what's going to be revealed to be behind all this mayhem, but here's what I do know. If it's one person or 100 people, That number is not even a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of the population of this planet. When you watch the videos of the carnage, there are people running towards the destruction to help. This is a giant planet, and we're lucky to live on it, but there are prices and penalties incurred for the daily miracle of existence. One of them is every once in a while, the wiring of a tiny sliver of the species gets snarled, and they're pointed towards darkness. But the vast majority stands against that darkness. And like white blood cells attacking a virus, they dilute and weaken and eventually wash away the evildoers and, more importantly, the damage they wreak. This is beyond religion or creed or nation. We would not be here if humanity were inherently evil. We'd have eaten ourselves alive long ago. So when you spot violence or bigotry or intolerance or fear or just garden variety misogyny, hatred, or ignorance, just look it in the eye and think, the good outnumber you, and we always will. Personally, I find great comfort in these words because there's truth in them. There is so much good in this universe. So many good people. And I am grateful to be living in community with so many of them. We will persevere together. We will persevere through the darkness, and we will be the light that we are called to be. Blessed be.